A former Navy SEAL returned to sell his father's cabin when a German shepherd brought a sick puppy. He brought both dogs inside, warmed the puppy, and stayed beside them through the freezing night. By morning, he learned the mother dog had come looking for his father, who was already dead. An elderly veteran revealed his father had spent his final year fighting to protect the village road. Several elderly homeowners said they never agreed to the property rights recorded under their names. Then, his father's own signature appeared on the disputed papers. So what had he really been protecting? Stay with this story to the end, and like and subscribe for more journeys of loyalty and healing. By the time the last car left Graypine Cemetery, snow had already softened the tire tracks along the narrow road. Travis Hale stood beside his father's grave with his hands buried in the pockets of a dark olive field jacket, watching white gather across the fresh earth. At 43, he still carried the posture the Navy had drilled into him. Back straight, chin level, attention moving even when his body was still. Beneath the jacket, he wore an olive t-shirt and charcoal cargo pants, practical clothes that made sense everywhere except beside a coffin. People had come quietly, a retired lineman, 2 widows. Men Travis vaguely remembered from childhood, older now and slower on the ice. Each had said some version of the same thing. Warren helped me. Warren showed up. Warren never let a storm stop him. Travis had thanked them because that was what a son was supposed to do. Inside, the words scraped. The father they described had patience for broken furnaces, dead batteries, stranded neighbors, and half the mountain. Travis remembered a man who could look at a good report card and ask why one grade was lower than the others. A man who had once told a 17-year-old boy that being afraid meant the world would eat him alive. Weak, soft, not ready. Travis had carried those words through training, selection, deployments, and years of work that should have made them meaningless. Somehow, they had followed him home. The cabin sat above the village on a slope of pine and stone, smaller than Travis remembered, and exactly as stubborn. Warren had repaired the porch rail instead of replacing it, patched the chimney flashing with sheet metal, and stacked split firewood beneath the same lean-to Travis had helped build at 14. Inside, almost nothing had moved. The old workbench still crowded one wall. A red carpenter's pencil lay beside a coffee tin full of screws. Warren's brown chore coat hung from a peg near the mudroom, one elbow patched with darker canvas. Travis stopped there longer than he intended. Then he took out his phone, photographed the rooms for the estate inventory, and set a folder of sale documents on the kitchen table. That was why he had come back. Funeral, probate, cabin. Done. He had already spoken with an agent in the county seat. If the title work was clean, the place could be listed within the week. By spring, Graypine could belong to memory. The thought should have brought relief. Instead, it felt like another room he could not get warm. The storm arrived after dark. Wind moved hard through the pines and drove snow against the windows in dry handfuls. Travis checked the wood stove twice, secured the loose shutter outside the kitchen, then returned to the table with a mug of coffee he did not want. He was reading the first page of the property packet when something scraped across the porch. He looked up. The sound came again. Not a branch. Too low. Too deliberate. Travis crossed to the door, paused long enough to listen, then opened it against a gust that scattered snow across the floorboards. A German shepherd stood in the porch light. She was lean but strong, her black saddle dark beneath a coat powdered white, warm golden tan showing along her legs and chest. A small pale gold marking shaped like a drop sat low beneath her throat. Her right ear stood straight, the left tipped slightly outward. In her mouth, she held the edge of a thick woolen wrap. The bundle dragged between her front paws. Something inside it moved. Travis stepped onto the porch and crouched without reaching for her. Easy. The shepherd watched him with amber-brown eyes. No barking, no retreat, just calculation. Travis eased one hand toward the bundle. The dog lowered it carefully onto the boards and looked down. A black and tan puppy, no more than a few weeks old, lay curled inside the cloth. One ear was beginning to lift, the other still folded softly against his head. His body trembled. Travis touched 2 fingers against the puppy's side, then checked his breathing and responsiveness. The little body felt warm despite the cold outside, tired rather than limp. "All right," Travis murmured. Inside. The shepherd did not move. Travis lifted the bundled puppy, stepped back through the doorway, and waited. After 2 seconds, the dog crossed the threshold. The next several hours passed without drama, which Travis preferred. He dried the puppy, wrapped him in clean towels, and set a shallow box near, but not against, the wood stove where the heat remained steady. He warmed the room gradually, offered small amounts of water at intervals, and watched for changes in breathing, alertness, and body temperature, without pretending he knew more than he did. If the puppy worsened, he would find a way to a veterinarian regardless of the storm. The shepherd stayed close enough to touch the box with her nose. Every time Travis approached, her head rose. Once, when he shifted the puppy to replace a damp towel, she stood between Travis and the box. Not threatening. Blocking. Travis stopped immediately and let his hands fall open at his sides. "Your call." The shepherd sniffed his fingers, checked the puppy, then stepped away. After that, she allowed him closer. Near 2 in the morning, the puppy finally lifted his head on his own and licked water from Travis's fingers. The shepherd's posture changed almost imperceptibly. Her shoulders lowered. She lay down beside the box and, for the first time, closed both eyes. Travis remained on the floor with his back against a kitchen cabinet. He had spent nights in worse places, listening for worse sounds. Still, the quiet unsettled him. Warren's coat hung 10 feet away. The carpenter's pencil remained on the bench. Travis looked at the sleeping shepherd and wondered what kind of person had taught an animal to walk through a blizzard toward this specific door. His father had never taught Travis where to go when he needed help. Mostly, Warren had taught him not to need it. Morning came slowly, blue light pressing through frosted windows. The puppy was still weak, but he was awake enough to complain when Travis lifted him, which seemed like progress. He drank more water and nosed at the corner of the towel. The mother watched, but no longer stood every time Travis moved. Around 8, an old pickup stopped below the porch. A woman in a deep brown olive parka climbed out carrying a paper sack against her chest. Travis recognized June Mercer only after she pushed back her knitted cap. She had lived 2 cabins down when he was a boy. Her hair was mostly silver now, her tortoiseshell glasses fogged from the cold, and the same practical expression remained. "I brought biscuits," June said as Travis opened the door. "Funeral food is mostly pie, and pie is not breakfast no matter what Graypine believes." Then she saw the shepherd, the paper sack lowered. Mara. The dog stood immediately. Her tail moved once, not wildly, but with recognition. June looked from Mara to the puppy near the stove. "Where did you find them?" "They found me." June came inside, removed her gloves, and crouched several feet away. "That's Baxter. Silas Boone's pup. 5 weeks, maybe a little more." Her face tightened. Silas must be beside himself. "Who's Silas?" June looked up at him. 81. Veteran. Lives north of here. Same ridge road. Less than a mile if the cut-through isn't drifted shut. Travis glanced at Mara. "She brought the puppy here in that wrap." June did not look surprised. That caught him more than anything else. "You've seen this before?" not the puppy. June stood slowly. But Mara coming here? Plenty of times. To my father? To Warren. June brushed snow from her sleeve. Silas's phone line fails whenever the weather gets bad. If he needed medicine, if his generator quit, if he just hadn't answered anyone all day, Mara would come down this road. Sometimes with a note on her harness, sometimes with nothing. Your father knew what it meant. Travis looked toward Warren's chore coat. June followed his eyes but did not soften the truth for him. He told a few of us years ago, if Mara shows up alone, don't send her away. Follow her or call him. My father did that. June gave him a measured look. Your father did a lot of things you probably weren't here to see. The words could have sounded accusing. They did not. That made them harder to dismiss. Travis turned toward the kitchen table. The sale documents were still spread beneath his coffee mug, neat and ready. Beyond them, Mara lay beside Baxter, facing the same door she had crossed in the dark because she had expected Warren Hale to open it. Warren was gone, but the dog had come anyway. Travis closed the property folder. Can the road to Silas's place take a snowmobile? June nodded. If you know where the ditch bends. I don't. I do. Travis reached for his field jacket. Mara was already standing. Mara was waiting beside the mudroom door before Travis had finished pulling on his gloves. June stood at the kitchen window, studying the white slope between the cabin and the ridge road, while Travis packed Baxter back into the thick wool blanket. The puppy protested with a thin, irritated sound when Travis tucked the edge beneath his body. That was the best thing Travis had heard from him all morning. He was still tired, but his eyes followed movement now, and he had enough energy to nose at Travis's wrist before settling again. If he starts fading, we turn around, Travis said. June nodded. Silas will agree. He's stubborn, not stupid. Mara watched the bundle leave the floor and moved immediately to Travis's side. Outside, the wind had dropped, though snow still sifted from the pines. June led on an older snowmobile she kept beneath Warren's lean-to, while Travis followed on Warren's machine with Baxter secured against his chest, inside a padded carrier June found in the shed. Mara ran beside them, only where the snow was shallow, then accepted a place on the rear utility platform when the drifts became deep. Travis noticed she did not simply follow the machine. At every bend, she lifted her head toward the trail ahead, as if confirming that the world remained where she remembered it. Silas Boone's cabin stood less than a mile north of Warren's, tucked behind a stand of fir trees, where the ridge narrowed above a frozen creek. Smoke rose weakly from the chimney. The porch had been shoveled the day before, but fresh snow had already covered half the steps. The front door opened before June killed her engine. An old man appeared in a heather-gray Hindley beneath a deep brown cardigan, one hand gripping a hickory cane. Silas was thin, his shoulders lowered by age, but not collapsed by it. White hair lay close to his head, and his light brown eyes fixed immediately on Mara. For a second, nothing in his face moved. Then the cane slipped against the doorframe. Mara. The German shepherd jumped from the utility platform and crossed the snow in 3 long strides. She stopped just short of knocking him over, pressed her chest against his knees, then twisted her head back toward Travis. Silas saw the bundle. Baxter. Travis carried the puppy onto the porch. He had a rough night. He's better than he was. Silas's hands trembled when he reached toward the blanket, but he did not take the puppy immediately. He touched Baxter's head, then looked down at Mara. You took him. Mara leaned against his leg. Silas closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were wet. Inside, the cabin was warmer than Travis expected. A propane heater stood near the kitchen wall, and an old generator hummed faintly outside. Silas placed Baxter in a low basket beside the stove and inspected him with the careful concern of someone who knew the animal well enough to notice small changes. Baxter licked his thumb. Silas released a breath. "He was warm yesterday afternoon," Silas said. "Not himself. I figured if he wasn't better by morning, I'd get him down to the clinic." He glanced toward the silent telephone on the wall. Then the line quit. Snow came faster than the forecast said. I wasn't taking an 81-year-old man down that road in the dark, just to prove the 81-year-old man was still an idiot. June removed her parka. Growth. Temporary. Travis looked at Mara, and she decided morning was too long. Silas gave the dog a tired smile. "She's never been good at waiting when somebody needs something." That answer carried more history than Travis expected. Silas explained the system without making it sound remarkable. Years earlier, after a winter fall left him unable to reach his phone, Warren had started checking on him during bad weather. Eventually, Silas began attaching notes to Mara's harness when the telephone lines failed. Medicine. Generator trouble. Need a ride. Sometimes there was no note at all. If Mara arrived alone at Warren's porch, Warren came up the ridge and asked questions later. "Your father trusted her judgment," Silas said. Travis looked toward Mara. She had positioned herself between Silas's chair and Baxter's basket, close enough to watch both. "Last night there wasn't a note." "No." Silas studied the blanket. "Baxter was sleeping in that by the stove. I woke sometime after midnight, and Mara was gone. So was he." Travis pictured the dog working the edge of the heavy blanket into her mouth, dragging the bundle across the floor, then carrying and pulling it through the snow, along a route repeated enough times to become memory. She brought him to the person she thought would help. Silas's expression shifted. She brought him to Warren. The distinction sat between them. Travis did not correct it. He asked Silas how often Warren had come. Silas shrugged. "Enough." "For what?" "Generator. Medication. Furnace once. Drove me to the VA clinic when my eyesight got bad. Changed the porch steps because he said the old ones were trying to kill me." "That sounds like friendship." "It was." Silas leaned back, then added, "But I wasn't special." Travis looked at him. Silas pointed through the window toward the village below. "Ask Helen Marsh, who climbed onto her roof every October, because she had no business doing it herself. Ask Ray Cullen, who drove him to appointments after Ray stopped driving at night. Ask the Parkers, who kept the same generator running 15 years because Warren refused to let the thing die." Travis felt irritation rise before he could stop it. The man Silas described had time for roofs, rides, furnaces, generators. Warren had apparently possessed an endless reserve of patience for people who were not his son. Silas seemed to read enough of Travis's face to understand. "Don't make the mistake of thinking I'm telling you your father was easy. I wasn't. Good. Because he wasn't." Silas rubbed one thumb along the smooth handle of his cane. Warren could repair a carburetor with 3 tools and make his own son feel like a disappointment with 3 words. He knew how to fix machines better than things he broke inside a house. Travis looked at him sharply. Silas did not apologize. For once, hearing someone speak well of Warren did not feel like being asked to erase his own memory. Later, when Baxter had eaten a little softened food and curled beneath Mara's chin, Silas showed Travis a photograph pinned beside the refrigerator. It pictured Warren standing outside an old clapboard community hall with 6 other people. One of them was a woman Travis did not recognize, with ash-brown hair streaked silver and a burgundy organizer tucked beneath one arm. "That's Claire Nolan," Silas said. "Veteran service officer. She handles grants, medical transport, benefits, things the rest of us pretend we understand, until she explains them." "What was Dad doing there?" trying to turn that old hall into somewhere people could go when winter got bad. Veterans, mostly. Older folks, too. Backup heat, clinic days, rides into the county seat. Nothing fancy. Silas told him Claire had been pursuing grants, while Warren dealt with repairs, logistics, donated equipment, and the kind of practical work nobody noticed until it failed. The project had existed before Warren died and would continue without him, but progress had slowed badly over the previous year. The reason was Summit Arc Development Group. Travis had seen the name on a glossy envelope among Warren's estate mail. Silas explained that the company was assembling land for a winter resort above Graypine. At first, some residents welcomed the idea. Jobs were scarce. Younger families kept leaving. Then certain roads that the county had maintained for decades started appearing on documents as private access. Owners of old cabins received new notices about violations. Some were told future snow removal or utility access might become uncertain. Purchase offers followed. Legal offers? Travis asked. Usually. Then people can say no. Silas's mouth tightened. That's what Warren thought too, until saying no started making other things harder. Travis did not answer. He left Mara and Baxter with Silas and walked back toward the machines with June. They had barely reached the lower lane when Helen Marsh called from her porch and asked whether Warren's son knew anything about roof flashing. At the mailboxes, Ray Cullen recognized Travis and told him Warren had driven him to the county clinic twice a month after cataract surgery. Near the old repair shed, Tom Parker laughed when he heard Warren's generator had finally outlived him. None of them told the story as if Warren had been a saint. They spoke as if he had simply been there. That difference made it harder for Travis to dismiss. Back at Silas's porch, Travis found Mara sitting beside the old man's chair, while Baxter slept between them. He asked the question that had been building since Summit Arc entered the conversation. What did my father think they actually wanted? Silas stared toward the snowy ridge for a while. Near the end, Warren kept saying the resort itself wasn't the whole problem. They needed a clean way through the valley. Roads, access rights, connected parcels. Whose parcels? I never got the whole list. Silas looked at him. But I remember what he said the last time we argued about whether any of us should just take the money and leave. Travis waited. Silas's voice was quiet. They don't need all of us to sell. They only need the right pieces to connect the road. Travis thought about the folder waiting on Warren's kitchen table. His own sale documents. The cabin he intended to put on the market before the week was over. He had no intention of inheriting his father's crusade. He did not even know yet whether Warren had been right. But before Travis signed away a single acre, he wanted to know exactly where that road was supposed to go. The county records office had not changed much since Travis was a boy. The ceiling still hummed under fluorescent lights. The radiators still clicked too loudly. And somebody had taped a handwritten sign above the copier asking people not to fix paper jams with pocket knives. Travis stood at a wide counter with Warren's deed open beneath one hand, while a clerk brought out 2 older survey books from storage. He had come for one answer before signing anything. Where exactly did his father's property sit in relation to the road Silas had described? The answer turned out to be difficult to see on a single page. That was when Aaron Daly looked over from the next table and said, "You're reading the parcel map backward." Travis raised his eyes. She was in her late 40s, lean, with auburn hair tied low at the back of her neck and faint freckles across a square, weathered face. A rust-brown thermal shirt showed beneath a slate-gray overshirt, and a bright orange survey notebook lay open beside an old folding ruler. "I'm reading north at the top." "That isn't the part you have backward." Aaron stepped over and tapped the easement markings with one finger. "You're looking at individual properties. Look at the access." Travis moved aside. She introduced herself only after studying Warren's parcel number. Erin had worked as a county survey technician years earlier, and now handled private boundary work. Warren's name was familiar to her, though she made no claim of friendship. "I'm not interested in proving your father right," she said. "Or wrong. Good. I'm interested in whether the lines agree with the records. That's all I need." Erin pulled 3 maps together: a highway access plan filed 2 years earlier, a series of recorded easements, and the older road maintenance map. At first, Travis saw nothing but colored lines crossing property boundaries. Then, Erin used her ruler. Summit Arc had purchased or obtained access rights over scattered parcels, stretching from the lower highway toward the mountain ridge where the resort was proposed. Individually, the transactions looked unrelated. Together, they created something else: a corridor. "If they complete this sequence," Erin said, tracing it with the edge of her ruler, "they can move service traffic off the county road here, cross these parcels, and reconnect above the village. Through Graypine. Along the edge of it. What happens to the old road? That depends on what rights they ultimately control." Her ruler moved again. 1 break remained in the chain: Warren Hale's land. Travis stared at the small rectangle containing the cabin, workshop, and a strip of wooded slope he had spent half his life wanting to escape. Silas's words returned to him. They only need the right pieces. For the first time, Warren's refusals to sell looked less like an old man clinging to a house and more like a decision with consequences beyond the porch. Travis felt no satisfaction in discovering that, only a new kind of irritation. Could Summit Arc build without this parcel? Possibly. More expensive, different grade, more permitting. Erin closed 1 map and opened another. "But this route is cleaner." "Cleaner for them." "For engineering, yes." She said it without judgment. That helped. Then she frowned. 2 properties farther south carried recently recorded access amendments. Erin wrote down the document numbers and pulled the associated files. The first belonged to Helen Marsh. Travis recognized the name immediately, the widow who had called to him from her porch the previous day. The document stated that Helen had agreed to expand an existing winter maintenance easement into a broader access right. "She signed this?" Travis asked. "The file says she did." An hour later, Helen stood in her kitchen, wearing a faded blue cardigan and reading glasses, staring at the photocopy Travis had brought. "I signed something about snow removal," she said. "You're sure?" Helen gave him a look sharp enough to remove any suggestion that age had made her uncertain. "I've lived in that house 52 years. I know the difference between a plow and a resort." Erin kept her questions narrow. Who brought the document? Was anyone else present? Did Helen receive a copy? Helen remembered a representative from a land services company who said several property owners were updating winter access paperwork. She had signed where she was told. She had never been given the version now recorded with the county. Outside, Travis said, "So it's fraud." "No." He looked at Erin. "It's a discrepancy," she said. "We need the original package, document versions, witness information, and the certification record. Angry conclusions are cheap. Evidence takes longer." Travis almost smiled. Warren would have hated her, or respected her, possibly both. A second file created a different problem. Ray Cullen appeared to have signed an access amendment on a Thursday afternoon in early November. Travis remembered Ray mentioning cataract treatment. A call to Claire Nolan confirmed that Ray had spent that entire day at a medical center outside the county. Claire had arranged the transportation herself. That was enough for Travis to stop seeing isolated mistakes. It was not enough to know what they meant. Claire asked him to meet her at the old Graypine Community Hall before dark. The building stood behind the volunteer fire shed, a long clapboard structure with frost clouding its windows. Inside, The heat came from 2 portable units, and half the ceiling lights did not work. Claire Nolan stood beside a folding table covered with grant forms and repair estimates. At 57, she had ash-brown hair, streaked with silver cut to her jaw, pale green eyes, and the efficient calm of somebody accustomed to helping proud people fill out forms they insisted they did not need. A burgundy organizer rested beneath one arm. Silas was there too. So were Mara and Baxter. Baxter slept in a basket near one of the heaters, while Mara lay beside Silas's chair. When an older veteran across the room grew visibly uncomfortable as several people arrived at once, Mara lifted her head, crossed the few feet between them, and settled near his boots. She did nothing dramatic. She simply stayed there until his shoulders lowered. Travis watched longer than he meant to. Claire noticed. "That's what Warren wanted this place for," she said. "Not the dog specifically." "Good. I was worried the grant application was unusually ambitious." Claire smiled once, then opened her organizer. She showed him plans for wheelchair-accessible doors, backup heat, monthly clinic space, transportation coordination, and a small workshop. Some funding applications had already been submitted before Warren died. Local donations covered part of the renovation. Then Claire produced a state reference number. "Your father filed a complaint 6 weeks ago with the Elder Property Protection Program." Travis looked at her. "About Summit Arc?" "About several land transactions around Graypine. He sent copies of documents he thought needed review." "So there's already an investigation." "A preliminary file. Not a full investigation. Warren had patterns, not a finished case." That changed the shape of everything again. His father had not simply spent his last months complaining across kitchen tables. He had started putting the problem somewhere it could outlive him. Claire handed Travis a copy of Warren's cover letter. He read only the first paragraph before closing it. Not because he was finished, because Warren's voice was too easy to hear in the blunt sentences. By evening, Travis was back at the cabin with 3 questions instead of 1. Why did Warren believe the access documents were being misused? How much had Summit Arc known? And why had the entire route seemed to depend so heavily on Warren refusing to sell? He opened the estate file again, this time looking for anything connected to the property rather than trying to finish it. Tax receipts, insurance, an old septic inspection, then a glossy white page carrying the blue-gray mountain logo of Summit Arc Development Group. Travis stopped. At the top, Access Consent. At the bottom was Warren Hale's signature. Travis knew it immediately. Heavy first letter, shortened, final stroke. The same signature on birthday cards, school forms, and every note Warren had ever left beside a broken appliance. Travis read the page twice, then a third time. The document appeared to grant access rights over part of Warren's property. He sat back slowly. All day he had been moving toward one explanation. Warren had discovered something wrong and planted himself in the one place Summit Arc needed him to leave. But Warren had signed. Travis looked toward the dark window. Across the ridge, somewhere beyond the trees, Mara was probably lying beside Silas, while Baxter slept near the stove. The whole village seemed to remember Warren as a man who refused to abandon people. Now Travis was holding evidence that his father might once have agreed to the very thing he later fought. He reached for his phone and called Erin. When she answered, he said, "I found something." "What?" "A Summit Arc access consent." A pause. "Whose signature?" Travis looked down at the page. "My father's." He did not open the sale documents again that night. Derek Morrow arrived at Warren's cabin shortly after 10 the next morning in a clean, dark SUV that looked strangely polished against Graypine's snow-packed road. Travis saw the vehicle stop from the kitchen window and closed the Summit Arc consent before Derek reached the porch. The man who knocked was not what Travis had expected. Derek was 52, broad-faced and composed, with salt and pepper hair combed neatly to one side and a charcoal quarter zip over a pale blue shirt. His boots were expensive, but practical, and a gunmetal fountain pen rested in his coat pocket. Nothing about him suggested a man who needed intimidation to get what he wanted. "I'm Derek Morrow, Summit Arc." I guessed. Derek glanced at the snow gathered along the porch rail. "I heard you were settling Warren's estate. I thought it was better to introduce myself than let you learn who I am from a stack of county filings." Travis let him inside but did not offer coffee. Derek did not seem offended. He stood near the kitchen table and looked around the cabin with the careful respect of someone entering a house that still belonged emotionally to a dead man. "Your father and I disagreed," he said. "Frequently. That seems to be something he was good at." A small smile passed across Derek's face. "That we can agree on." He did not begin with a purchase offer. Instead, he talked about Graypine. The village had lost population for more than a decade. Younger families were leaving because there were few jobs beyond seasonal work. County services were stretched thin, and maintaining roads through a shrinking tax base cost more every winter. Summit Arc's resort, Derek said, could bring construction work, year-round maintenance positions, new utility investment, and a stronger commercial tax base. Travis disliked how much of it sounded reasonable. He had seen the empty storefront beside the post office. He had noticed how many houses belonged to people over 60. Even Claire had admitted the Veteran Center would need grant money because Graypine could not fund it alone. "So what's the part you leave out?" Travis asked. Derek's expression did not change. "The part where development always asks somebody to accept change." That's a careful sentence. It's also true. Then Derek removed a folder from his coat. Inside was another copy of the access consent Travis had found the night before. Warren Hale's signature sat at the bottom. Derek tapped it lightly with the fountain pen. "Your father wasn't against the project when we began." Travis studied him. "You spoke with him?" "Several times. Early on, Warren understood that improved access could help the whole area. Later, he became convinced we were trying to force people out." "Were you?" "No." Derek answered too easily for Travis to read anything from it. "He became difficult," Derek continued. "Suspicious. Every survey marker was a conspiracy. Every offer was pressure. Warren was a capable man, but capability and flexibility are not the same thing." The description hit closer than Travis wanted. He could hear Warren dismissing a different opinion before it was finished. He could remember arguments that had stopped being about the subject because his father had decided yielding meant weakness. For several uncomfortable seconds, Travis wondered whether Graypine had done what grieving communities sometimes did, rounded the sharp edges off a dead man until stubbornness became courage, and every old fight became principle. Derek slid a business card across the table. "The offer on this property is still valid, better than market value. You don't have to inherit every argument your father left behind." After he drove away, Travis stared at that sentence longer than the card. Then he called Erin. She arrived before noon carrying her orange survey notebook and a document envelope thick enough to bend. Travis laid both copies of the access consent beside each other. Erin ignored the signature at first. She checked page numbers, footer codes, recording stamps, margins. Then she asked, "Do you have any older county access paperwork?" Travis did not. Erin did. She had requested archived easement files after their meeting the previous day. One document was 7 years old, long before Summit Arc appeared in Graypine. It granted the county limited permission to maintain a drainage culvert and move snow equipment along the edge of Warren's parcel during severe winter conditions. The final page contained Warren's signature. Travis leaned closer. Same placement, same angle, same shortened stroke at the end of Hale. Not similar, identical. Aaron placed the current Summit Arc document beside it. The old signature page carried a small footer code matching the county winter maintenance packet. The Summit Arc cover pages used an entirely different numbering system. Someone had attached Warren's old signed page to a broader set of terms. Travis felt anger arrive quickly. Aaron stopped it before it could become a conclusion. This proves the signature page came from another document. They reused it. It appears that way. So, that consent is fraudulent. It may be invalid. It may have been assembled improperly. Those are not the same as proving who did it, why, or whether Summit Arc knew. Travis pushed away from the table. You always make bad news less satisfying. That's what evidence does. The partial answer changed the problem rather than solving it. Warren had signed something, but perhaps not what Summit Arc now claimed he had signed. Aaron spent the afternoon tracing the company that had processed several access agreements. The same outside land services firm appeared repeatedly, a contractor hired to help property owners with title updates, easements, and acquisition paperwork. Helen Marsh's consent had passed through that company. So had two others Warren had flagged in his state complaint. Claire called before Aaron finished. Her voice was tight. "Can you come to the community hall?" Travis found Silas there with Mara beside him, and Baxter sleeping in a basket near the portable heater. Claire stood beneath an open electrical panel with an inspector, her burgundy organizer already filled with notes. Summit Arc had submitted a formal request that the county review safety and zoning compliance before the Veterans Center received further approvals. Travis expected Claire to be furious. Instead, she pointed to the exposed wiring. "They're right about this." He looked at her. "And that rear exit is too narrow. The restroom won't meet accessibility standards without reconstruction. Half the emergency lights are useless." "So, Summit Arc has a point. About the building?" "Yes." "And you're saying that out loud?" Claire stared at him. "I'm trying to build a veterans center, Travis, not win an argument by putting veterans in an unsafe building." That answer stayed with him. The conflict was becoming more complicated just when he wanted it simpler. Silas crossed the room while Claire and the inspector measured the rear doorway. Halfway there, the old man slowed, his cane planted hard against the floor. Mara stopped immediately. Someone called her from near the heater. She did not move. Silas waved a hand. "I'm fine." Mara sat against his leg. "Traitor," he muttered. Travis walked over, but Mara had already made the useful decision. She had not dragged Silas forward because everyone else was moving. She had simply stopped with him. Silas took a minute, caught his breath, then lowered himself into a chair. Travis looked at the dog. For most of his life, strength had meant continuing. Warren had taught it that way. Training had reinforced it. Move. Finish. Endure. Mara seemed to understand something more selective. Sometimes the right move was to stop. Later, Claire showed Travis copies of Warren's earlier correspondence with the state. Warren had already questioned the same land services company now appearing in Aaron's records. He had not known exactly what was wrong, but he had noticed the pattern. Travis drove back to the cabin before dark. He did not feel closer to forgiving his father. That surprised him. Instead, he felt closer to seeing Warren clearly. A man could make mistakes. A man could be difficult. A man could hurt his own son badly and still recognize when someone else was being treated unfairly. Those truths did not cancel each other. At this kitchen table, Travis opened his laptop and wrote 2 messages. The first went to the estate agent. "Do not list the Hale property. Hold all sale activity until further notice." The second went to the county office responsible for access records. He requested formal review of the easements affecting Warren's parcel and asked that no transfer relying on the disputed consent proceed until its document history had been examined. Then he called Aaron. "We can show my father's signature page came from an older agreement." "Yes, but that doesn't prove Summit Arc did it." "No. And Helen isn't enough to establish a pattern. Not yet. Travis looked at Derek Morrow's card lying beside the old county document. So, we find out whether this happened to other people. Aaron was quiet for a moment. And if it did, then we find out who knew. Travis ended the call. The sale folder remained on the table. This time he did not merely close it. He moved it into the drawer. The first argument broke out before Claire Nolan had finished explaining the fire code. Graypine's old community hall was fuller than Travis had ever seen it. Folding chairs filled the center of the room. Coats hung from every available hook, and melting snow darkened the floor around dozens of boots. Claire stood near a portable whiteboard, with her burgundy organizer open beneath one hand, while residents talked over one another about Summit Arc, the Veteran Center, road access, jobs, property rights, and whether anyone in the room still understood what the argument was actually about. A young mechanic named Ben Carter stood near the back wall and said the resort might be the first real reason in years for people his age to stay in Graypine. His sister had already moved 2 counties away for work. 3 other younger residents nodded. Across the aisle, Helen Marsh replied that jobs did not give a company the right to decide what an 80-year-old woman meant when she signed a piece of paper. Another cabin owner said he wanted to sell. He had no children interested in the property, his knees were failing, and Summit Arc had offered enough money for him to live comfortably near his daughter. Then a veteran near the window asked why everybody assumed people like him wanted a center built around their problems. "I spent 30 years learning how to take care of myself," he said. "I don't need a room where everybody asks how I'm feeling." Silas Boone leaned on his hickory cane 2 rows away and muttered, "Nobody asks because you never stop talking." A few people laughed. The tension loosened for 3 seconds, then returned. Travis remained along the wall beside Aaron Daly. 4 days earlier, he would have expected the room to divide cleanly into people protecting Graypine and people willing to sell it. Instead, every position contained something he could understand. Ben wanted work. The cabin owner wanted security. Helen wanted her choices respected. The veteran wanted dignity. Claire wanted a center that could meet real needs without turning anyone into a charity project. Even Derek Morrow's argument about economic decline had contained enough truth to be dangerous. Travis realized he had spent most of his life doing the same thing with Warren. His father had been wrong or right, cruel or misunderstood. A man Travis needed to defeat, or a man Travis needed to forgive. Those categories were easier than admitting Warren might have loved him and still failed him badly. Claire finally lifted both hands. "This meeting is not a vote on whether Graypine is allowed to change," she said. "It's about whether people understand what they agreed to before somebody changes it for them." That quieted the room. Not completely, but enough. Afterward, Aaron led Travis into the side office, where the heat barely reached, and an old copier occupied half a desk. She had spent the previous day arranging the questionable consent records by date instead of property. The pattern looked different that way. Most of the documents had passed through the same land services contractor within an 11-month period. Several property owners had signed legitimate forms first: snow access, title updates, drainage permissions. Then broader access documents appeared later in county records. "What are we missing?" Travis asked. "Process." Aaron tapped the timeline. "We know questionable documents exist. We don't know what happened between the kitchen table and the recorder's office." Claire joined them, carrying a note with a phone number. "I may have someone who knows." The woman arrived an hour later through the rear entrance because she did not want to walk through the remaining crowd. Lila Grant was 36, small-framed, with dark brown-black hair brushing her shoulders and tired brown eyes that moved first to the windows, then the door. She wore a dusty blue-gray turtleneck beneath a charcoal coat. While she spoke, one hand remained inside her pocket, fingers turning something metal. Travis noticed, but did not ask, until Lila finally pulled it out. An old employee lanyard. No identification card remained attached. "I worked for Ridgeline Property Services," she said. "They handled acquisition paperwork for Summit Arc." Erin did not start with accusations. She asked how files moved. That helped. Lila explained that field representatives met homeowners, collected signatures, and uploaded scans. Staff received monthly performance bonuses partly based on the number of completed consent packages. Completed meant signed? Complete meant accepted by management. What happened if something was missing? It went upstairs. To whom? Regional review. Sometimes legal. I never knew exactly. Lila twisted the lanyard clip between her fingers. Some packets came back completed. With new signatures? Sometimes the same signature page, different attachments. Sometimes missing initials appeared. Sometimes certifications changed. Travis leaned forward. "You saw people altering documents?" Lila shook her head immediately. "No. That's why I never reported fraud. I didn't watch someone manufacture a signature. I watched paperwork leave incomplete and return usable." It was less than Travis wanted, because it sounded true. Erin asked whether anyone inside Ridgeline raised concerns. Lila nodded. More than once. Some older owners thought they were signing winter access updates. One field rep wrote that a client did not understand the development easement language. Who received that warning? Ridgeline Management. Summit Arc acquisition was copied on some of it. Derek Morrow? I don't remember which messages had his name. Travis felt disappointment start to rise. Then Lila looked toward him. "You're Warren Hale's son." It was not a question. "You knew him?" "He came to our office." Travis went still. Lila remembered Warren arriving one afternoon carrying a cardboard file box against his brown chore coat. He had asked to speak with someone responsible for compliance. When the receptionist told him to leave a complaint, Warren refused to hand over the box. "He wasn't yelling," Lila said. That almost made it worse. "What did he say?" Lila looked down at the metal clip in her hand. "He said, 'I don't care who started this. I want to know who's brave enough to stop it.'" For several seconds, Travis heard nothing except the cop-iron fan winding down behind them. The line sounded like Warren. Not the Warren people had been polishing into a village saint. The difficult Warren. The man who believed courage meant choosing a direction and refusing to move. For once, that stubbornness had been pointed at someone other than Travis. Claire later confirmed through the state liaison that Warren's complaint packet included sample consent forms, road access discrepancies, document reference numbers, and a request that older property owners receive protection during review. What Warren had not provided was a complete list of affected residents and their personal circumstances. "Does that weaken the complaint?" Travis asked. "It limits how many people the state can identify directly," Claire said. "But there was enough to open the preliminary file." "So why hold the names back?" "I don't know." That question stayed unresolved. By evening, the temperature dropped sharply. The forecast called for another hard freeze, and shortly after dark, 2 sections of Graypine lost power. The Veterans Center was nowhere near ready to operate, so Claire opened the church basement as a temporary warming site. The debate from the afternoon gave way to practical work. Nobody asked who supported Summit Arc before helping carry blankets. Travis drove supplies between cabins. Ben Carter brought his repair truck and helped start an old generator. Helen Marsh organized food. The veteran, who had complained about being treated like charity, spent 20 minutes setting up folding cots for people older than himself. Silas arrived with Mara, while Baxter remained in a warm basket near the church office. Mara moved through the basement without excitement, checking Silas each time he stopped. When an older veteran became overwhelmed by the noise and crowded room, Mara settled several feet from his chair. She did not press against him or demand attention. She simply remained where he could see her. His breathing slowed. Later, Silas took too long climbing the church steps. Mara reached the door, looked back, and immediately returned to him. Travis watched the two of them come up together. Warren had spent years doing this. Not grand rescues, not heroic gestures. Checking heat, carrying groceries, making sure somebody had a ride before the road iced over. For the first time, Travis understood that his father might not have stayed in Graypine because he was unable to leave. Maybe, at some point, staying had become a choice. Near midnight, Erin found Travis stacking bottled water beside the church kitchen. She held up her phone. The state investigator got the internal email production. Travis wiped his hands on his cargo pants. And? Erin read the first message. A Ridgeline compliance employee had warned Summit Arc Acquisition Management that several consent packages could not be verified as representing the property owner's full understanding of the rights being transferred. The warning named document groups. The dates matched Warren's complaints. Then Erin opened the reply sent 2 days later. Derek Morrow was on it. His instruction was short. Proceed with completion of the access corridor. Legal can address outstanding consent issues separately. Travis read it twice. It still did not prove Derek had altered a single document. But that was no longer the question. Derek had been warned, and the process had continued. Claire came up behind them. The state wants an emergency administrative review. When? Soon as they can assemble the county and state people. Travis looked across the basement. Mara was lying beside Silas's cot. Ben Carter was carrying blankets for the same elderly residents whose opposition to the resort had irritated him that afternoon. The village had not suddenly agreed about its future. It did not need to. Travis finally understood what he was choosing. This was no longer Warren's argument that he had inherited by accident. Whatever happened next, Travis wanted the people in that room to decide their own future with the truth in front of them. Tell the investigator I'll be there, he said. By 9 the next morning, 3 county maps covered the front wall of Graypine's municipal meeting room. Aaron Daly had taped them side by side, so the same road could be seen across 40 years of records. First, as a narrow public route maintained by the county, later surrounded by private parcels, and finally, as part of the access corridor Summit Arc hoped to complete. Travis sat behind Silas Boone, rather than beside the officials. He had already provided his documents. There was nothing left for him to perform. Mara lay beneath Silas's chair with her front paws crossed, black and gold head resting between them. Every few minutes, she looked up when the room shifted or a chair scraped, then settled again. Claire Nolan sat across the aisle with her burgundy organizer open. Lila Grant waited near Aaron, visibly uncomfortable but present. Derek Morrow arrived alone. The hearing officer explained the purpose before anyone spoke. This was not a criminal trial. No one would decide that morning whether Summit Arc had committed fraud, whether anyone should be arrested, or whether the resort could never be built. The question was narrower. Were there enough serious irregularities in the land consents and road changes to justify temporary restrictions while the state and county continued reviewing them? Travis appreciated the distinction. A week earlier, he might have wanted a room where somebody declared one side right and the other wrong. Now he understood why that would have been too simple. Erin went first. She did not accuse anyone. She walked the officials through maps, survey records, recorded easements, and decades of county maintenance logs. Snow removal invoices showed public crews working the Graypine Road year after year. Drainage repairs had been funded publicly. Older plats treated the route as community access, long before Summit Arc entered the valley. Then she showed the newer corridor, one parcel after another, access right after access right, and Warren Hale's land sitting across the cleanest remaining route. The map does not establish intent, Aaron said. It establishes why these particular documents matter. That sentence set the tone for everything that followed. Lila described the process at Ridgeline Property Services. Field employees collected signatures. Completed consent packages affected performance bonuses. Incomplete packages went to regional review and sometimes returned in usable form. "Did you personally see anyone forge a signature?" the hearing officer asked. "No." "Did you personally alter documents?" "No." "Did you see packages change between submission and return?" "Yes." Lila's fingers tightened around the old lanyard in her lap. She also confirmed that concerns had been raised about older property owners not fully understanding the broader rights contained in some agreements. Helen Marsh spoke next. She did not make a speech. She said she had agreed to updated snow access because she wanted the plow to reach her house. She had not knowingly granted development access across her property. Another resident confirmed the same kind of misunderstanding. Claire submitted documentation showing Ray Cullen had been outside the county receiving medical care on the date his consent supposedly had been completed. Nobody in the room gasped. There was no single theatrical revelation. The weight came from repetition. One discrepancy could be an error. Several, moving through the same process, became harder to dismiss. Then the state representative entered Warren's complaint packet into the review. Travis watched the folder move across the table. Warren's handwriting was visible on the cover sheet. For nearly his entire life, Travis had associated that handwriting with lists of chores, measurements, corrections, things that needed another attempt. Now those same blunt block letters labeled document numbers belonging to people Warren believed needed protection. Derek spoke after lunch. He stood without notes. "Graypine has lost residents, businesses, and tax capacity for years," he said. None of that was created by Summit Arc. Travis could hear several people shift behind him. Derek continued. "The resort proposal is not an attempt to erase this community. It is an investment in a community that needs one. New roads, construction employment, permanent maintenance work, commercial revenue. Those things matter too." He pointed toward the maps. "Some residents want to sell, some support development. They should not lose their choice because others are afraid of change." It was the strongest argument Travis had heard from him, because it was partly the same argument Travis wanted to make. Choice mattered. The state representative then displayed the internal emails Aaron had shown Travis the previous night. One message warned Summit Arc Acquisition Management that several consent packages could not be verified as representing the owner's full understanding of the rights being transferred. Derek's response followed 2 days later. "Proceed with completion of the access corridor. Legal can address outstanding consent issues separately." The hearing officer looked at him. "Did you write this?" "Yes." "You had received the warning?" "I had." "And you instructed acquisition work to continue?" "I instructed a development process to continue while legal questions were reviewed. That is not the same as instructing anyone to falsify documents." No one in the room could honestly say he was wrong about that distinction. But Travis could no longer ignore the other side of it. Derek had known there was a problem, and instead of stopping long enough to make sure vulnerable property owners understood what was happening, he had chosen momentum. When Travis was asked to speak, he remained seated for a second before standing. He did not look at Derek first. He looked at Ben Carter, the young mechanic who wanted resort jobs, at Helen, at Claire, at Silas, at people who did not agree with one another and still had to live on the same roads after the hearing ended. "I don't think Graypine should stay frozen because people are afraid to change it," Travis said. "And I don't think my father was right simply because he fought something." Silas looked up. Travis continued. "If people want to sell, they should be able to sell. If they want development, they should be able to support it. But a future chosen by people who understand the decision is different from a future built because somebody decided their confusion was convenient." He stopped there. No speech about Warren, no promise to save the village. Silas spoke last among the residents. Mara lifted her head when he stood. Silas leaned on his cane, and Mara rose with him, staying against his left leg as he moved forward. "We're old," Silas said. "Most of us know it." A few quiet laughs moved through the room. "We're not asking anybody to pretend Graypine can stay exactly the way it was 40 years ago. We're asking to be asked before somebody decides that being old means our answer doesn't count." He returned to his chair. Mara lay across his boots. The decision came late in the afternoon. The county and state did not cancel every Summit Arc agreement. They did not declare the company guilty. They ordered temporary protections. Transactions relying on disputed consents would be frozen pending review. The current public use status of the Graypine Road would remain unchanged while the access history was examined. Development permits tied to the contested corridor would be suspended temporarily. Documents showing possible alteration or misuse would be referred to the appropriate investigative authorities. Claire asked immediately about the Veterans Center. The answer was equally clear. Its electrical system still needed repair. Its rear exit still needed widening. Accessibility requirements still applied. No one was going to waive safety rules because Summit Arc had problems of its own. Claire nodded. "Good." Travis smiled despite himself. Outside, evening had turned the snow blue. People began leaving in small groups, still disagreeing about what Graypine should eventually become. That felt healthier than forced agreement. Before Travis left, the state representative asked about something in Warren's complaint. "There are document reference numbers without resident names attached. Did your father keep a master list?" Claire looked at Travis. "I don't know," he said. Silas did. Warren said he kept names separate. Why? Silas adjusted one glove. Some of those folks were embarrassed. Debt. Memory trouble. Dependence on family. One man had signed something 3 weeks after losing his wife and barely knew what day it was. Warren said if the state needed names, he wanted somebody to tell him first how they were going to protect those people. Travis stood very still. All week he had thought Warren might have withheld a missing piece because he was suspicious, stubborn, or trying to control the investigation himself. Instead, he had already sent enough information to expose the pattern. The part he kept private was the part that could humiliate the people involved. Warren had not only been protecting property, he had been protecting dignity. That realization followed Travis home. The cabin was silent when he entered. He removed his field jacket, turned on the kitchen lamp, and went directly to Warren's file cabinet. No searching by instinct, no hidden compartment. Just folders arranged in Warren's irritatingly practical system. Road, utilities, community hall, state complaint. Behind the complaint file was a sealed envelope marked Resident Contact. Private. Inside were names, phone numbers, document references, and short notes. Widowed. Needs daughter present for financial discussion. Early memory decline reported by family. Do not contact through Ridgeline. Travis closed the folder. This was the list. Not a secret weapon. Not evidence Warren had hidden from the world. A safeguard. Travis set it aside to give Claire and the investigator under the protections now being established. When he returned the remaining files to the cabinet, his hand struck a small wooden box pushed against the back. He knew it before he lifted the lid. His mother's things. A faded scarf, 2 old photographs, a birthday card Travis had made in grade school. He almost closed it. Then he saw the envelope beneath the photographs. His name was written across the front. Travis, Warren's handwriting. Below it, in smaller letters. For Travis. If staying ever becomes harder than leaving. For the first time since returning to Graypine, there was no property deal to stop, no consent to verify, no hearing to prepare for, and no one else in the room who needed something from him. Travis sat down at the kitchen table. He turned the envelope over and slid one finger beneath the flap. Travis slid one finger beneath the flap and stopped when the paper tore. For a moment, that small sound seemed louder than the wind against the cabin windows. Warren's letter was 4 pages long, written in the same blunt block handwriting Travis had spent a lifetime associating with measurements, repair notes, and lists of things that still needed doing. He unfolded the first page beneath the kitchen lamp. There was no greeting beyond his name, no attempt at humor, no explanation for why the letter had been hidden beneath his mother's things. Warren began with the sentence Travis least expected. I spent years calling it, making you strong, because I was too proud to call it what it was. I was afraid, and I did not know how to raise you after your mother died. Travis read it again. Then he put the page down, stood, walked to the wood stove, and added a log that didn't need adding. His hands needed something to do. When he returned to the table, Warren's voice continued without asking for sympathy. After Travis's mother died, the cabin had become too quiet. Warren had been terrified of losing his son as well, not necessarily to death, but to a world Warren believed would punish weakness without warning. He had convinced himself that a hard father would prepare Travis better than a loving one who admitted he was scared. So when Travis needed encouragement, Warren gave him another standard to meet. When he succeeded, Warren pointed toward the next challenge. When he was frightened, Warren treated fear like a defect that could be burned out through pressure. I thought if you were never satisfied, you would never stop improving, Warren had written. I did not understand that a boy can hear "try harder" often enough that eventually all he hears is, "You are not enough." Travis leaned back and closed his eyes. The words did not erase the old kitchen arguments. They did not change the night he had left Graypine after Warren called him soft for wanting more than a life on the ridge. Understanding the reason did not remove the damage. The next paragraph hurt more. Warren knew why Travis had enlisted. Not every reason, but enough. You wanted to prove I was wrong about you. The truth is, I never believed you were a coward. I was afraid you might become one because I was afraid of everything after your mother was gone, and I mistook my fear for wisdom. Warren wrote that he had been proud when Travis completed basic training, proud again when he became a Navy SEAL, and proud every time word reached Graypine that his son was still standing somewhere far from home. He had even driven to the county seat once to buy a newspaper because Travis's unit had been mentioned in an article. Warren had kept the clipping. Travis remembered nothing about that. Warren had never told him. I kept thinking there would be a better time to say I was proud. Then every time you came home, I heard myself correcting you again. Pride is a poor excuse for silence, but it was mine. Travis lowered the letter. Tears blurred the carpenter's pencil lying on the workbench across the room. Anger came with them. You could have called, Travis said into the empty cabin. His voice sounded too large in the room. One time, you could have said one damn sentence. No answer came, of course. That was the cruelty of finding honesty after a funeral. It could explain the past, but never participate in repairing it. Travis wiped his face with the heel of his hand and kept reading. Warren wrote that after Travis left Graypine, he had tried several times to pick up the telephone. He never knew how to begin without turning an apology into an argument. so he began repairing other things instead. Silas's generator, Helen's roof, Ray's rides to the clinic, broken porch rails, frozen pipes, winter roads. He knew none of that could make him a better father retroactively. He did not want Travis to mistake service for penance. But helping people had taught him something he wished he had understood when Travis was young. I thought strength meant getting a man back on his feet. Sometimes it does. Sometimes strength is sitting beside him long enough that he remembers he can stand when he is ready. Travis thought of Mara refusing to leave Silas in the community hall. The dog had stopped because the man beside her needed time. Warren, near the end of his life, had apparently learned the same lesson he had never known, how to give his son. The letter finally explained why Warren remained in Graypine. At first he stayed, because leaving the cabin felt like abandoning the last place where Travis's mother was still present in ordinary things. The pantry shelf she had painted, the lilacs she planted beside the steps, the mark on the kitchen doorframe where they measured Travis's height. Later, staying became less about grief. Silas needed someone when the telephone failed. Claire needed hands to repair the community hall. Helen needed somebody willing to climb a ladder she had no business climbing herself. Other people needed rides, heat, tools, or simply someone who would notice if their porch light had not come on. One day, I realized I wasn't staying because I could not leave. I was staying because there was still work worth doing here. Near the end, Warren wrote one more line Travis had to read 3 times. "If you ever come home, do not stay because of me. Stay only if you find something here that belongs to the man you chose to become." Travis folded the pages long after midnight. The letter had answered the question that had followed him through every success of his adult life. Warren had been proud. Warren had loved him. And Warren had still failed him in ways love did not excuse. For the first time, Travis did not feel compelled to choose between those truths. The next morning, the snowfall was light enough to reveal the mountains beyond the cemetery. Travis stood in front of Warren's grave with no prepared speech. "I understand you better now," he said. His breath whitened in the cold. "That doesn't mean you were right." The wind moved through the pines. Travis looked down at the name carved into the stone. "You hurt me. You should have said it while you were alive." He waited, allowing the anger to exist beside everything else. "And I spent a long time making sure I only remembered the worst parts of you." His jaw tightened. "I'm sorry for that." Another silence, then the words that had been harder than any accusation. "I loved you too, Dad. I still do." Back at the cabin, Travis called the estate agent and canceled the sale rather than postponing it again. He did not make another call announcing that he intended to save Graypine. Instead, he met Claire with a notebook and asked what the Veterans Center still needed. The answer was more useful than inspiration. Electrical work, accessibility modifications, a proper emergency exit, insurance, transportation funding, volunteer scheduling, and enough operating money that the place would not collapse when one generous person disappeared. Travis used part of the savings he had intended for relocation as seed funding, but Claire insisted on a local board, written budgets, grant oversight, and separate responsibility for programs. Travis agreed immediately. He had learned enough from Warren's life to understand the danger of making one person indispensable. The following months changed Graypine slowly. The investigation into Summit Arc continued through the state process. The disputed transactions remained restricted while regulators and investigators worked through them. Nobody declared development itself forbidden. Some residents still wanted investment, and several younger people, including Ben Carter, helped design a winter maintenance program that could employ local workers regardless of what happened with the resort. The old community hall passed its electrical inspection after rewiring, received a wider rear exit and an accessible entrance, and eventually opened with a small clinic room, backup generator, transportation desk, and workshop. The veteran who once complained that he did not need anyone asking about his feelings became one of the workshop's regular volunteers. Nobody asked him how he felt. They handed him broken equipment and let conversation happen if it happened. Travis remained in Warren's cabin. He repaired the porch rail properly instead of patching it. He kept Warren's red carpenter's pencil in the coffee tin with the others, rather than placing it somewhere ceremonial. Silas stayed on the ridge with Mara and Baxter. The puppy grew into his oversized paws, though his right ear continued to lag behind the left for months. Mara began visiting Travis's cabin more often, sometimes following Silas down the road, sometimes appearing with Baxter when the weather was clear. Travis never treated the dogs as something Warren had left him. They belonged to Silas. Their visits meant more because they were choices. By the beginning of the next winter, snow had covered Graypine again. One evening, Travis was kneeling beside the wood stove when he heard scratching on the porch. The sound stopped him before he reached the door. Almost a year earlier, that same sound had brought a frightened mother carrying a sick puppy toward a man she expected to find there. Travis opened the door. Mara stood beneath the porch light, black and gold coat dusted with snow. Baxter, now long-legged and nearly grown, stood beside her with bright eyes and both ears finally upright. There was no blanket, no note, no emergency. Mara looked at Travis, then passed him toward the warm room. Travis smiled. "Come on in." Mara crossed the threshold first. Baxter hurried after her. Travis closed the door against the cold. The cabin was still Warren's in 100 small ways. It probably always would be. But it was no longer a place Travis needed to escape, and it was not a monument where he planned to spend the rest of his life grieving. It was simply home. And now, when someone came to the door, Travis knew how to open it. Some goodbyes leave us with answers that come too late, but that does not mean healing has come too late with them. Travis could not change the years he spent misunderstanding his father, and Warren could not take back the words that hurt his son. What Travis could do was stop letting that pain decide the rest of his life. Sometimes peace begins when we allow love and hurt to exist in the same memory without denying either one. And sometimes grace is found in something as ordinary as staying, helping, forgiving what we can, and keeping the door open for someone who needs a place to come home to. If this story meant something to you, please share your thoughts and subscribe for more stories like this. May you find peace with the words you were able to say, and grace for the ones that came too late. If you have any feelings, thoughts, or suggestions about this story, what would you like to share into the comments below, so we can listen and continue making these stories better?